So, three natures. So as you read about the question, Paramartha Samudgata. The Tibetan for this is Tantang Parama Samudgata Yang Tak Pa. And in the, I'm going to tell you about something that I can't tell you. That's I've forgotten it. If I planned these classes, I would have looked this up. And it's in the commentary on the Sutra Unraveling of Thought by the Korean monk Wonch'uk, and I don't know how to pronounce Korean. Now, in Chinese, he's called Yuan Tzu. Okay. I didn't know we were going to get into this today. Dates for Wonch'uk?
613 to 696.
You're guessing? Or?
I think it's in a footnote in the first two pages.
Yeah, 7th century. Okay.
Just memorize the root text.
Yes. 7th century AD. And you read about him today, correct? At what age did he come from Korea to China? 15 when he went to China. Okay. And when he went to China, Korea was composed of, what we're calling Korea was composed of 3 kingdoms. And it was during the period of his lifetime that these 3 kingdoms, my history is very bad, but so correct me wherever you can, that these 3 kingdoms came together. He wrote an extensive commentary, huge commentary, very learned commentary on the Sutra Unraveling of Thought, citing from all sorts of Indian texts, and criticizing some, taking others. He had studied, before studying with Shenzong,
I'm trying to pronounce it.
Yeah. He studied with Paramartha. I know about with Paramartha. What does it say in there? It talks about the 3 periods of Yogacara Buddhism in China, right? What are the 3? And Dashabhumika means the sutra on the 10 grounds. What more does it say about that? Anything? And what Indian panditas are they following? Huh? Ratnamati? Bodhiruchi? And who? Buddha Shanta. Okay. And then the second period? Who's next?
Mahayana Sangraha School.
So that's Asanga's Summary of the Great Vehicle, which John Keenan has translated into English, and Etienne Lamotte has translated into French. And who are the masters associated with that? Indian masters? Paramartha. Okay. And does it say in there that, well, what are Paramartha's dates? 499 to 569. So that answers our question about whether Wonch'uk studied with Paramartha, which is no. This thing shouldn't be recorded. Coming to a class unprepared, but anyway, we're working out together. I have something I want to get to, which is actually not what you read today. It's more background. That's why, one reason why. But Wonch'uk, having come to Chang'an, which was then the capital of China, and which is now called Xi'an, where I was a few years ago, and where it's just north of there, isn't it? Where the terracotta soldiers and generals and so forth are buried under the ground.
You mean the first emperors?
I guess so. You know, that huge north of there. And Chang'an was the capital, and not Beijing, and which became the capital when?
Ming Dynasty.
When's that?
That's around 16th, 15th
So
century.
long.
is the
So
Ming
it's
Dynasty.
almost 1,000 years later. So now, give me, let's see, what was I going to get? Wonch'uk came to Chang'an when he was, you said, 15 years old? And what year was that?
628 or 627?
What?
Either 627 or 628.
Okay, 627, 628. And when did he meet Xuanzang? Excuse the pronunciation.
It's okay.
645.
645. So we have 628 to 645, where he's living in China, and he's imbibing. He's a smart dude. All right. I mean, he's a very intelligent, quick-witted person. So he's not waiting for somebody to come back from India. Xuanzang hadn't even left for India. All right. Was it a 12-year trip? Look at the section on Xuanzang. It lists his life.
Left in 629.
629. So it could have been that he came 627 or 8 and heard, well, Xuanzang's going to India, so I'll sit around and do nothing until he comes back. Well, he didn't. He imbibed the Paramartha tradition, learned the Paramartha tradition. And undoubtedly, the first phase also, although I don't know that for a fact, but how could you not? Once you're in a culture that's reacting to an earlier tradition, you end up, especially if you're a wide-ranging scholar, studying the earlier one. I would think so. But in any case, Paramartha. And so Xuanzang comes back, and Wonch'uk becomes Xuanzang's disciple, his number 2 disciple. He's Korean, which there's some feeling that, like, because he's Korean.
Not any good.
Yeah.
Can be any good.
It's just like Tibetans talking about Mongolians. They'll say, Sopo Geshe. A Mongolian, he's a Mongolian scholar. Certain put downs, you know? And, well, you know, and certainly in any parochial society, what do we still do in this country with regard to scholarship? Big and small universities, and we never say things like a professor from the South, whereas other people are professors. You know, where you specify. It certainly used to be that way in the North. They were professors, and the others were professors from the South. And how much rivalry there was between Wonch'uk and Kuei-chi. How do you spell it? As it is in the book?
Apostrophe UDI.
What? Louder?
Apostrophe UDI.
U-E-I.
And then hyphen chi, CHI.
C-H-I. Who was Xuanzang's sort of number one disciple. And it lays out in there the type of rivalry that European American, what word can we give? Contemporary? You can't say that, because scholars, Tibetan, I don't like to say traditional and non-traditional, because you're talking about two different traditions of scholarship, right? Say traditional, it sounds, well, the Buddhists are traditional and we are non-traditional. We don't have a tradition. Give me a break. Now, if you say contemporary scholars and what? Traditional scholars, but then are they all dead? They're somehow brain dead. Anyway, maybe we just have to be specific. People like Stanley Weinstein, Shotaro Ida, and a couple others who have looked into this don't believe the stories of rivalry between Kuei-Zi and Wonch'uk. But at least their students, they will say, blew this up into an important rift. Part of it being that Wonch'uk was Korean. Now, Tibetans, it appears, have never realized that Wonch'uk was from Korea. And this is most obvious when they refer to him as, in Tibetan, Gyai Lobern. I should give the English first, the Chinese scholar. Now, on other instances where they speak about the Chinese commentary, where Tsongkhapa speaks about the Chinese great commentary, you might explain that away by saying, well, it doesn't mean it was written by, that he thought it was written by a Chinese, but that it would, or that it's ambiguous, that it was written in Chinese. But when you get things like Gyai Lobern, this term in Tibetan, you can't translate it any other way except by Chinese master, Chinese. Now it just in Tibetan, it's interesting that the terms Gyana and Gyaga, which mean China and India, when you have just Gya, it means China. Gyage means Chinese. Okay, now this is all to say, this is the climax, which is now an anticlimax, that Wonch'uk explains why he is called Samudgata, means risen above in Tibetan Yandapa. Tendam certainly doesn't mean, the first part of it, Paramartha, doesn't mean, so in English, this is ultimate, raised above, or elevated. And it couldn't be that he was raised above the ultimate. And what I'm getting to is that Wonch'uk has an explanation of the name, and I don't remember. That's the anticlimax, this whole layout. But in the process of getting to it, I hope there was something worthwhile. We need merely refer probably to the beginning of, this is chapter 7 that we're talking about. In the Tibetan rendition is chapter 5 in the Chinese. And need merely refer probably to the beginning of that. And if I run upon it or think to look it up, I'll look it up for you. And it's just one of the marvelous details that Wonch'uk has in his commentary that you don't find. Now, amongst the many people that Wonch'uk cites and talks about is Paramartha. Not always agreeing with Paramartha. But also, he doesn't, well, I don't know if he ever cites Xuanzang, Menzang or whatever. And disagrees with him openly. Actually, I haven't noticed that. But you know, like cites him as he does with Paramartha and then puts it down gently. But he did disagree with Xuanzang. For instance, on the issue of whether there are 3 final vehicles or not. Now, 3 final vehicles means that there are 5 types. My gosh, these classes go to places where I would never imagine. But, you know, I only go there because it's a valuable topic and will help. 5 lineages of persons. And it's rather interesting that in India there were 4 castes and the outcasts. Lineage here in Sanskrit is Gotra, in Tibetan is Rik. Don't draw the letters in the order I draw them. Started from the bottom, went to the top. And so there's the Bodhisattva lineage. That means those people who will go on to, who are definite to begin the path and the Bodhisattva path and go on to the enlightenment of a Buddha. The solitary realizer vehicle those who are destined to begin the path. That means the path, the first of the 5 paths, the path of accumulation as a solitary realizer, and go on to become a foe destroyer, solitary realizer, who gets out of cyclic existence, destroying the foe, which is the afflictive emotions.
Is that the Pratike Buddha?
Excuse me?
Is that the Pratike Buddha?
Yes. So, Bodhisattva, Pratike Buddha, and hearers. Prada. So those who, and I'm very carefully saying those who are destined to begin the path as a hearer and go on and achieve the enlightenment of a hearer. And then there's the uncertain. We'll begin one and switch to the other. So there will be some people would start the Bodhisattva path and switch to the hearer path. Some would start the hearer path, switch to the Bodhisattva path, etc. Some who would, I would think, be included in uncertain. I don't know, actually. Those people who go on, those people among the hearers and solitary realizers who finish their own path and then go on to the Bodhisattva path, I don't know what their lineage is. Because they're really not, they're switching after completion of their path. So that's a good question to ask.
So completion of one path doesn't preclude beginning of
Does not preclude. The only ones that are precluded are those whose, in Tibetan they're called Rik Cheba, those whose lineage is 7, like the outcast. Now, there's a discussion in Reflections on Reality on the personality types, really you can say, of Bodhisattva, solitary realizer, and hearer, that I can say is pretty good because I'm just drawing it. I found a good place to draw it. So when somebody like Xuanzang speaks of 3 final lineages, he means there are some who just finish the hero solitary realizer paths and never go on to become Buddhas. Never. That's why they said it's not just 3 lineages, but 3 final lineages. And Tsongkhapa holds the same opinion, that in a Sangha's system, a Sangha being, see, we haven't talked names until now, a Sangha being the founder of the prime founder of this whole tradition, Tonglen, in Tibetan Tonglen, unobstructed, unhindered. Tsongkhapa also has this opinion that in a Sangha's mind-only presentations, he holds that there are 3 final vehicles. But he recognizes that a Sangha in other texts, non-mind-only texts, that a Sangha does have a Madhyamaka text in which he sets forth that there's just 1 final vehicle. So, okay, now Wonch'uk held the view that there's just 1 final vehicle in a Sangha system. So this, I'm pointing out a disagreement between him and his teacher. You know, his later teacher, Xuanzang. Now, as mentioned in here, somebody attributes this to the, I don't know if it's true or not, it's like putting together numbers, that Korea at that time was composed of 3 kingdoms that were being brought together, and it was part of there was a political, it was a time of 3 things coming together, and therefore Wonch'uk said there are 3 final vehicles. Well, it strikes me as an interesting serendipitous event, right? He's too good of a scholar, I think, for that to be the major factor. But just how he makes his case, I don't know. Whether he's drawing from this other text of Asangas that Tsongkhapa says is Madhyamaka and is not from the is not mind only.
Is that some obscure text, or is it a well-known?
No, it's his commentary on the Sublime Continuum, Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, which is called the Uttara Tantra. It's not a Tantra, even though it has the name Tantra, in which it's very clear that all sentient beings have the Buddha nature. There's no such thing as those whose lineage is severed. These are people who can't make it forever. These are people who can't make it even to the enlightenment of a hero, even to the enlightenment of a solitary realizer. Never mind the end of the bodhisattva path of Buddhism. Will never make it. To me, if I try to put a good face on this, it's like it's a scare tactic of you wouldn't want to be somebody who's stuck in cyclic existence forever, You better reform your behavior, otherwise you'll be an outcast. So this is outcast. Now, is it an outcast by birth or an outcast by behavior? I'm reducing it to an outcast by behavior, but in fact, in the system, it's severed by birth. You are that, but it's not your family lineage. It's your lineage of rebirth. You have always been this way. You've always been this way. And you know, that's the caste system. So there are discussions about the seeds that cause people to be of different personality types. Are they just there naturally? Or are they newly planted? Or are they both? And there are arguments among people holding all of these views. Now, then how do you know, among those people who, I'm raising a question now that I can't answer, among those people who hold that these seeds are not naturally within us, but are newly planted, how, you know, if I became somebody of severed lineage 500 lifetimes ago, what did I have to do to become of severed lineage if it's newly planted? But of course, you know, as you know, you could have the bodhisattva, if you take the view of it's naturally there, well, this is the so-and-so's natural disposition. And then you hear, you know, this type of person who's rather selfish and so forth, deep inside is, you know, has the seed for being altruistically motivated. When that person hears about altruism, and this truly happens, that person just follows and gives up the former way of living, and those seeds become activated. That's one way of looking at the dual position of it's there naturally and it's newly developed, which Tsongkhapa takes to be the most intelligent way of looking at it. Now that topic is discussed in the Ocean of Wisdom that Gareth Sparham translated.
Ocean of Eloquence?
Yes, Ocean of Eloquence.
Okay.
And you'll find a short section in there on this topic. It's interesting. Yes.
I have a question concerning that with other powered natures. So you're saying that that these different levels of beings have these seeds that of latent seeds that ripen. So if those were, I guess, in this system, truly established on some level, then that would create these divisions. But if they were not truly established, then would that mean that there was one vehicle that because even the seeds that produce or that ripen into being.
Now, according to the Indian scholars in this tradition, we're never going to get to the topic, but that's fine. Who are the scholars in this Indian, you know, that when they say scholar, that means scholar adept. So I should say scholar adept. Asanga and his half-brother Vasubandhu. Vasubandhu is renowned for having earlier held so-called lower systems of penance, and his brother Asanga convincing him eventually to become a follower of mind only. And Vasubandhu indeed wrote important commentaries, very important commentaries on his brother's texts, and wrote independent texts himself that were very important. And one of Vasubandhu's students was Dignaga, the famous epistemologist, logician. And who it is said surpassed Vasubandhu in terms of epistemology and logic. Vasubandhu is known in Tibet, at least, for having 5 students who surpassed him in 5 areas. It's not because Vasubandhu was dumb, but it's sort of amusing. There certainly is a put down in it, but Vasubandhu is recognized for his tremendous learning, and he has studied a great deal. His earlier views, before he became mind-only, are the next to last or last topic studied in the doctoral program, the 20-year doctoral program for Gelupa studies. And Dharmakirti was not Dignaga's direct student. I just looked it up the other day. I don't know if he was a student of a student or what. But anyway, he was not a direct student of Dignaga's. And these two, Gelupa, you see why I paused then was, do I need to explain the term Gelupa? And then that gets us into 4 schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and then the 4 minor schools, 4 major, 4 minor. We won't do that today. Now, all of these, Asanga, meaning his mind-only texts, excluding the sublime continuum of the great vehicle, that one, his commentary on Maitreya's sublime continuum of the great vehicle, which Tsongkhapa takes to be Madhyamaka in view. I'm answering your question. These are all taken to be mind-only. Therefore, if you say, is Asanga a mind-onlyist in Tsongkhapa's system, what's the answer? No. He says no. We got one saying no. Any more saying no? So he wrote a text. He wrote one text that was Madhyamaka, and he wrote a slew of texts that were Chittamatra.
I would say Madhyamaka, because that would be the higher teaching.
So if he could write it, Tsongkhapa himself is a Madhyamaka. And if this fellow could write a Madhyamaka text, that makes him a Madhyamaka. That's sort of one reason. He could write a really valid text, which it's taken to be. The other is that Asanga achieved the 3rd Bodhisattva ground. And 3rd, right? And from Tsongkhapa's point of view, you have to have not only the Madhyamaka view, but within the Madhyamaka school, the view of the consequentialists, the prasangikas, in order to achieve the 3rd Bodhisattva ground. It's you can see that I'm trying to show you the flimsiness of the argument also. But you can see that the only answer, now that I've explained the reasons, from Tsongkhapa's point of view, is that he's really a Madhyamaka who's putting on a mind-only face. So then you say, what is it in the commentary on Maitreya's sublime continuum of the great vehicle that so convinces him? And it is that, as far as I know, that everybody has the Buddha nature. Well, that isn't frankly enough. Why? Because Tsongkhapa himself puts Asanga and Vasubandhu's Vasubandhu is left not as being a Madhyamaka, didn't show any signs of it. Who knows what they really were, but in terms of what they showed signs of, do you follow? He's a mind-onlyist. He ended up as a proponent of mind-only. Asanga in his mind-only text held that there are three final vehicles. Dignaga and Dharmakirti hold that there's one final vehicle. So you see, they are still mind-only, proponents of mind-only, still. Now, the point I'm getting to is that these are all followers of the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. And what does the Sutra Unraveling the Thought say about other powered natures? How they're established? Does it say that they are established by way of their own character or not? Yes. So, you raised a question about the term truly established, which in Tibetan is Dembar Truba. So then we get down to the relationship, and then all Madhyamakas, no matter what subdivision you're in, assert there's one final vehicle. Now remember, Wonch'uk takes Asanga's mind-only text as asserting one final vehicle. And the reading he would give is that these people are temporarily of severed lineage. No problem with that. Hitler is temporarily of severed lineage. No matter what he heard. Well, actually, he got really into Aryans. You know, it would be totally distorted, okay? Even if he liked it. So now, so you see, these are issues that are up in the air, and we're just trying to get straight various positions, okay? But we're not going to try to get straight so many positions that we don't end up with anything. You know, primarily we're looking into here Tsongkhapa's position, and then a slew of commentators on him who are making a mess and sometimes solving what he's doing. Okay, now, what is the relationship between Dembar Truba and Rangitseniki Truba? If you hold that other powered natures are established by way of their own character, do they have to be truly established? So if we say in the mind-only system, now that means in Tsongkhapa's version, but I think it's pretty well founded in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought. Since Semzambe Lugla in the mind-only system, Rangitseniki Truba Yina, Dembar Truba Yimbe Kawarta. It follows that whatever is established by way of its own character is necessarily truly established. What do you say? Der or Jicher? He says der. Jicher. Jicher. Her question came out of Jicher. You see? That's what I'm getting at. Because she's wrong. Dembar Truba and Rangitseniki Truba are synonymous. To be truly established, to be ultimately established, and to be established by way of its own character are synonymous. Well, or equivalent. George Dreyfus makes the interesting point that in Tibetan we have Turnchi and Turnchi added on to that, Mingi Namkang. Turnchi means like one connotation, one meaning, which he wants to translate. He sees, there are almost problems in anything you do, but I mean, there are problems in Tibetan too. One meaning, one connotation, but as equivalent. Whatever is the case with one is the case with the other, and so forth. Mingi Namtam means form of the name, thus synonymous. Tunjik Mingi Namtam then means equivalent and synonymous. Now, what does that mean? It's like there are two terms that are not only equivalent, what so of one is so of the other, but also the names themselves don't carry any other force. They don't communicate anything other than what the other name does. Well, I should have something that's Tunjik Mingi Namtam. Do you? For instance, when you say product and impermanent thing, they are Tunjik, but they are not Mingi Namtam. Cheba means product, Midakwa means impermanent thing, whatever's true of one is true of the other, etc. But product indicates something, the term produced by cause and conditions. Impermanent indicates momentary. You follow? The name itself. So George wants to say, let's use English more properly and call Tunjik Mingi Namtam equivalent and synonymous. Very good point. The only problem with it is, when you look in a English dictionary, what they list as synonyms are not just Mingi Namtam, right? That's where the problem lies. I was unable once at a conference to verbalize that objection, and stumbled my way through my gut feeling that he was still wrong. And was only able afterwards to tell him, the more I hear you talk about this, the more I feel you're wrong. And although I will use his distinction. I think it's a very helpful distinction. What's wrong is to claim this is how it's used in English. Do you follow? It just doesn't move over. But you can use equivalent and synonymous in, a Buddhist context in a different way. Okay. Now, I want something that's Tunjik Mingi Namtam. And whenever you think about it, something like that which has a rabbit, what is it called? Ryewonchen, for the moon. The moon is called Ryewonchen. Say it, Ryewonchen. Ryewon is rabbit. Chen means habit. And Dawa. Dawa, say it. Dawa. Now, what the first one has the sense of that which has or something that looks like a rabbit. The second one is that which has an equivalent, or the equivalent. And the equivalent is the sun. The moon. No. We have moon and sun. You gotta get two things. That which has an equivalent, do you follow? Anyway, or that which is the equivalent, then I will agree with you, the moon. The equivalent of what? The sun. It has a mate. Tache dame. Say it. Tache.
Tache.
Dame.
Dame.
Tache is and dame. That which has an equivalent and that which doesn't. So dame means that which doesn't have any mate, and that's why a husband or a wife, a mate, is called dao. Say it, dao. Dao. You just put panaro ho, but wo, dao. It's a non-sexist way of referring to your mate. Dao. How do we get onto this? Oh yeah. So This is by way of introducing that the terms established by way of its own character and truly established are equivalent in this system. Now, these people, we'll get down to the heart of the question, also hold that Shenwang are Rangitsiniki Truba. Therefore, they hold that they are Denpa Truba, Trengamba Truba, Yangdakpa Truba. You know, it's how there are others. That's not enough. That's not the relevant topic. Because Tsongkhapa claims that in the mind-only school, all phenomena, including existent imputational natures, are established from their own side. Rang'e ne Truba. So the one that's separated out, you wanted to separate out something, is Rang'e ne Truba. Now he presents the very interesting position that the mind-only school itself shows evidence that it asserts that even existent imputational natures, anything that exists, is established from its own side. Now you would think established from its own side, established by way of its own character, would be equivalent, right? And that's how the prasangikas, the consequentialists, the Tengyuba, hit them. You know, you should have seen that these are synonymous. Well, the mind-only person can answer, look, I never use these words anywhere myself. It's your great teacher, Tsongkhapa, who made this up and stuck this on us. It's very important to notice. Very important. They didn't say existent uncompounded space is established from its own side. But Tsongkhapa sifted through evidence in their presentations and in Chandrakirti's attack on them to put them into this position. So either he did something extremely subtle for which we should thank his genius, or he was merely trying to follow Chandrakirti's agenda and back up Chandrakirti's position like a lawyer and make the proponents of mind only look like shit. There's no question that Chandrakirti and the proponents of mind only disagree. There's no question at all. But just how they disagree and so what does Rang'e ne Truba mean that Denpa Truba or Rangitsiniki Truba doesn't mean? Oh, sorry. What does Denpa Truba mean that Rang'e ne Truba doesn't mean? In other words, Denpa Truba yina, Rang'e ne Truba yinbe kyabarta. Whatever is Denpa Truba is necessarily Rang'e ne Truba. Rang'e ne Truba is all phenomena, including existent imputational natures, in the mind-only school, according to Tsongkhapa. It's only Yondru Tang, Shenwang Ni, Denpa Truba. Denpa Truba here, A meaning also. Denpa Truba here, Yang. Denpa Truba Yang. So, Shenwang Tang, Yondru Ni, Rang'e ne Truba here, Denpa Truba here, Rangitsiniki Truba here. Okay? Niga, Songar. But really, Niga. We only need to break the categories into two. Rang'e ne Truba, which is true of everything, the wider circle, and then Denpa Truba, which is a smaller circle within that. So, Denpa Truba, truly established, which is equivalent to Rangitsiniki Truba, which is established by way of its own character, which in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought is literally, Rangitseniki never. Not truba, but never. No, I don't think there's any particular significance. Rangitseniki never. Subsisting, abiding, dwelling. Not Dembar neba, but Rangitseniki never. Instrumental, Rangitseniki. Adverbial instrumental. And the Dembar Truba, whatever, I don't know how you draw the circles, right? Are all within Rangune Truba, and these are either Yongdru or Shenwang, right? Whatever is Shenwang yina, Yongdru yinbe ma kya. Yongdru ma yinbe kya. Shenwang yina, Yongdru ma yinbe kya. Whatever is an other power nature necessarily is not a thoroughly established nature. It has a thoroughly established nature, but it is not a thoroughly established nature. And Yondro Yena Shenwang Mayimbe, whatever is a thoroughly established nature is necessarily not a other power nature. Okay? So they are Gelwa. They are, what do we say? Mutually exclusive. So anything that exists, Yerba Yina, or Kura Yina, Yerba Yina, Brahmani Truba Yimbe. Right? So if I say Yerba Yina, whatever exists is necessarily Brahmani Truba, you say what? Good. Yerba Yina, Rangitseniki Truba Yimbe. That was whatever exists is necessarily established by way of its own character. And you said, I accept it. So then, how do you answer them? What do you posit as something that is Ranguni Truba, but not Rangitseniki Truba? Something that exists and is Ranguni Truba, established from its own side, but is not established by way of its own character. Yeah.
It's like a total guess.
Yeah.
Imputational nature. I know there's some discussion of
Yeah,
that here.
imputational nature is fine. Even that, you could be more specific and say existent imputational natures, but imputational nature as like just a general term, right? Because the existent predominates. So you could answer, uncompounded space. Duma jegin nanga churjin, right? Duma jegin nanga churjin. Do you follow me? Uncompounded space. Rangitseniki truba. So you have to say dirt.
But
Right?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Where I'm confused is among a million things, but we talked about in one of the previous classes that the characterization of the imputational nature is that it does not subsist by way of its own character.
Right.
By definition, it's not
Right.
in nature. So that what followed was that both the other dependent nature and the thoroughly established nature must.
Now, that was one way of looking at it. Another was the statement in the Super Unraveling of Thought that what does not subsist by way of its own character is not produced. Thus, what is produced does subsist by way of its own character. You see, it's not just that negative root, okay?
Okay.
It's just, that's not the only source. And I believe that comes up twice in the Sutra. And you see Chandrakiri, this is on Sutra. And other people felt, well, if things aren't established by way of their own character, then they don't have any character, they wouldn't exist. They'd just be made up by thought, and you could call this piece of paper an elephant, and it would be an elephant. Do you follow? It's got to have something. There has to be some findability. Otherwise, you can just posit anything to anything, and it'll be there. And despite your liking that position, you would turn into a complete nut if you actually did that. See, you know, he says, well, I need to go to the store today, and we'd see him over here.
But
Yes. Yes?
isn't that what originally happened though? I mean, the terms are just imputed. It's just that we accept those imputed terms as signifying the same thing. So we all call paper paper, but if somebody had called them paper,
Well, we're not talking
first,
about the name.
not talking about.
We're not talking about the name. That's, well, she's not here either. We're not talking about the name. We're talking about the status of the object that the name indicates. This is a very important. In your reading of other people who are presenting the mind-only school or Madhyamaka, are they just talking about names? You know? Elizabeth Napper, in her Dependent Arising and Emptiness, which is on Madhyamaka, has an excellent introduction in which she takes apart contrasts. What are we calling them? European, American, Japanese, Indian. Anyway, all these folks. And when they talk about Madhyamaka, they're just talking about names, the status of names. And that Tsongkhapa's view is very different on that in Madhyamaka. It's very different on that in Mind Only also. That it's, from his point of view, much more profound than that. Yes.
So I'm pretty confused, but let me see if I can. Doesn't imputational nature, the basis of imputational nature is other powered natures in some sense? Don't.
Yes.
So isn't in some sense imputational nature actually other powered? Since the power comes out of imputational nature?
What is that other power? Produced by other causes and conditions. So if you take a non-existent imputational nature, you know, and you impute it to this table, right?
Yeah.
Then, or not even if you impute it, we don't have to go that. Its mere appearance, well, you can't say it's appearance. It's being established as an entity different from our eye consciousness's perceiving, or my eye consciousness perceiving, is an imputational nature. And its basis is the table, but that doesn't mean even that it exists. It just means we imagine it with respect to the table. And certainly the causes of the table are not producing it. But now even, what are the causes of the table in this system? Since, you could posit things that look like external world, somebody making it and so forth, but what really is the cause is a seed of perception, of having a perception of similar type in the past. Get into all sorts of problems suddenly when you get into this, but of course, that's what it's subjected to. Did we see a table just like this in the past? That is giving rise, and that seed's being activated. Sort of, do we rehearse the same, what was that movie called? Where the guy
Groundhog Day.
Groundhog Day. Where a guy wakes up every morning to the same day until he gets it right. But it is sort of like that, isn't it? And so the cause of the table and the perception of the table within this entity of consciousness is that seed. And So that perception arises independent upon the seed. And the consciousness, I'm gonna get caught in this. I understand, I'm glad we're in the first consciousness. I just pause a little bit.
Go on.
Difficulties in the system is it's another seed that, I'm wondering if I can say causes us to perceive the table as a different entity from the consciousness that perceives it. It's another seed. Now, it's being established as a different entity from the conscious perceiving it, just plain doesn't exist. The appearance of it as being established as a different entity from the conscious perceiving it does exist. So I think we can say that that appearance is caused by a seed. So because of our mistakenness in the past, we have this wrong type of seed that goes along with these other seeds. And you have factors mixing in. Now, it sounds fishy, certainly to begin with, and maybe to end with. But the type of, we're all existing here at UVA, right? Now, I don't mean the name UVA. We have a collective hallucination about UVA. And our collective hallucinations about UVA are similar, but they ain't the same, right? I mean, your UVA, my UVA. We may, that's what happens when people are talking about a topic. They'll say, well, what do you mean by it? And then you get in this discussion and this and that, and your image, my image, etc. All of our images are different. We operate through collective hallucinations anyway, even in an external world theory. And you want to say, well, but there is something out there that's stimulating our collective hallucination even, right? That's the external world. And I think it's very important to see how much collective hallucination there is. And then there's previous experiences with tables and so forth, and that's feeding in. And you could, in the external world system, that you can say is fairly accurate. Might or might not be accurate. When I came here, I thought there must be a parking lot under Capitol Hall, because there was one in University of Wisconsin. And, instead of me going around, where's the parking lot? Can I get to park there? It'd be real nice in the winter, which was Wisconsin. Let's see, for next time, please keep your questions alive for the material that we read for today, okay? But there is background. What you've been reading about is the question, right? I'm talking about the answer. But the answer, lays the groundwork for understanding more about the question. And we'll get to the detail about the question. Now, we read
Chapter 7.
So then, for next Tuesday, we could read 206 to 239, right? And again, get straight all of this material, practice the Tibetan. See if you could do out a chart of the three natures in English, Tibetan, and Sanskrit. And you can collectively do it, 2 by 2 or 4 by 4 or all of you together or whatever. Not something to hand in, just see if you can do it and see where your holes are, what you don't know yet. I haven't methodically written down in all these languages. And in Chinese too, and then we can do a chart that could be handed out to everyone. Just make sure it's right. Okay? Yes.
Could I ask just a yes or no question?
Yes.
Okay, our clearly established nature is permanent.
Yes.
Our seeds of perception permanent.
No. They're Shenron. Even ones that naturally abide in the mind are impermanent. Well, it's in. Does it? The nature of red pepper is that it's hot, or it's even easier. The nature of fire is that it's hot and burning. Is fire impermanent? Is hot and burning impermanent? Okay. But that doesn't mean that the nature is fixed. But that is Dharmakirti's argument against the Asanga type position. He doesn't check out Asanga, but he says requirements are important, and there are ways to overcome them. There are people who are ready to teach those ways, and who have the compassion to teach and so on. And his argument does go right along the lines of permanence and
Yeah, and then, you said a key.